Do you like the Oakland A's? Are you a fan of the Golden Knights? Do you love the Los Angeles Chargers? Well then, my friend, you're in the right place. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show with your host, Jake the Snake Silva, brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network.
I think it was pretty clear what we saw all from this game from game one. I mean, it basically told you what Phoenix was all about this whole time. And what's funny about this is, I think about it this, you have one particular person, whether it's a coworker or whether it's somebody, you've been close to, but not a whole lot of people really do talk about them much. But when you do, they're very successful people. And they're the ones that want to get they want their voices heard. And Phoenix right now, I could tell you that in game one was the most exciting. And the Suns absolutely beat Milwaukee 118-105. Here's the difference maker for the team, because Milwaukee right now is in a position, and as I've said before, you get to a point where once Giannis is not 110%, he's not the same. And then of course you got to rely on Chris Middleton, you got to rely on the rest of the bench to now have to pick up the load. And they did do that in the two games against Atlanta. But one point that I'll basically say is this, because Chris Paul has absolutely just become not just a one-hit wonder, but has been the guy that all it needed was just the right personnel, the right coaching, I think the right group of players to play with that makes this whole thing work. And Phoenix, I can't begin to tell you how many times they absolutely rushed Milwaukee. And what's so funny about it is that Giannis only had about 11 shots in the game. 11. Didn't even have more than enough to really carry the load for Milwaukee. And they contained him very, very well. There were only about a bunch of times that Phoenix let a few plays slip. But what's so valuable about Chris Paul that people don't realize. I mean, did you watch the shot, did you even see the shot from, behind the wing or behind the 3-point line? And then, of course, I think there was also a foul involved, I believe, right afterward, because it had to deal with something on his foot. So I thought that particular moment with Chris Paul, and he's been in the league for long enough, that, of course, calls like that, they're not going to they're not going to blow the whistle for every single call. They were going to let calls slip on by for as long as they possibly could. But really, in the end, Phoenix right now, and I'll tell you, they're hot. They are hotter than basically the weather out here in Vegas. I mean, that just tells you right then and there. And what's so fascinating yet unique about Phoenix's the way they played this thing out, because listen, I'll guarantee you by next year you're not going to see this type of run, because the Western Conference is so stacked with a lot of players. But I'll tell you, all it took was the right pieces to make this thing work. And after 16 years, game one was only just the beginning of it. And Chris Paul absolutely enjoyed every moment of it. Which leads me to this conversation next. Because when I think of Chris Paul, and this is what's kind of funny about this, because we look at the situation that's happening in Phoenix, it's working beautifully. I don't think anybody can dispute that or even come close to really counter-arguing what we just saw. And at least throughout this whole year, I know everybody wanted to complain about injuries. They all wanted to complain about, Ben Simmons couldn't shoot. And, if LeBron and Anthony Davis were not hurt, or if Kawhi wasn't hurt and disappeared, there's all these what ifs. What about being in the specific moment? It's one team. And here's what's kind of funny. And this is a team that's really hurting amongst all of this, and we're the complete laughing stock. That's the Houston Rockets. You know what's kind of funny about this whole thing? You look at the Rockets, okay, and this was a time that after Chris Paul left the Clippers, still has respect for them. But the problem of it was with the Clippers is that they continuously listened to the wrong person. They completely listened to the wrong person. They thought, oh, Blake Griffin, he's the man. Knows how to jam him. He's doing Superman jams. He's basically in your face. And then they look at Chris Paul like, oh, well, there goes your pick and roll. No. And that's why the Clippers have been such a sorry franchise for as long as they have possibly been in Los Angeles. As I've said before, and I talked about this, that the day the Clippers win, that's not the time that they're ever taking over Los Angeles. That will never happen. You can't outweigh one championship over the 17 that the Lakers have. That's just not possible. Okay? So being ideally realistic, all it is it's just pretty much building a bridge of respect. That's all it is. And when I think about this, the Rockets got Chris Paul at one point, and they had a bunch of talent. Clint Capella, James Harden, PJ Tucker, Eric Gordon. They had a bunch of really good personnel. And I thought they actually had a decent head coach in Mike D'Antoni. And then what was so interesting, we could go back and forth about this all day. But remember, Chris Paul got injured in that game against Golden State. What was the one thing that we realized the reality of James Harden is he just cannot pull the trigger. He can't close it out. That's James Harden's open reality. So when Chris Paul went down with that injury, we all saw James Harden get exposed. That was just the way that the Rockets were. And remember, a Chris Paul injury away, they actually could have got to the finals. But in a league that there is no timetable, there's no timetable at all to winning a championship. It's either now or never. Now or never. So it's unfortunate when you think about, the world of the NBA, because there is no 5-year plan. That's not what this league is all about. This league is all about we're either winning now or we're not winning at all. And we got to have the right personnel. We got to have the right coaches. We got to have the right players. We got to have the right the front office group, all the above. And so when I look at this thing, this is where the Houston Rockets are really hurting at. Because you listened to James Harden instead of Chris Paul. And Chris Paul's in the finals. Devin Booker gets him. DeAndre Ayton gets him. Monty Williams has always been there with him for 10 years. And they're in the finals. He gets along with this group. This group listens. James Harden couldn't do that. James Harden does his own thing. Not coachable, but still manages to shoot. You could still be a lethal shooter, but yet not be a number one. You could be a lethal number two. That's all you'd clarify as. Think about the trade for Russell Westbrook. They lost Clint Capella in the deal, and we just saw Clint Capella in the Eastern Conference Final for Atlanta. A lot of potential. You lost your backboard piece. Guy that was going to give you rebounds, guys that was going to give you important second chance shots to keep you in the game. Like, that's it. And then PJ Tucker in Milwaukee. I mean, how bad does Houston got to feel about themselves? All of this could have been a championship group if you just listened, if you just stayed patient. You would have had it. You would have beat Golden State. You definitely could have beaten the Lakers in LeBron's first year. And then not to mention, Clippers were not even close to where they were until Kawhi and PG arrived. And then you have Golden State. You had the Lakers. You have Denver. Utah is Utah. Houston could have easily fixed this whole thing. But all it took was just one piece to completely obliterate this whole thing. And that's why they're sitting on their couches right now and they're literally scratching their heads for hours and hours and hours on end. You could have had a championship, but instead you chose to listen to the wrong things, which, let's be honest, we've all made this mistake once. We've all made the mistake where we've listened to the one person that we probably should not have in that particular moment. But we're human beings for a reason. And then eventually, you're in a position in life where you live and you learn. That's what it's meant to be. You don't just obliterate this whole thing and then, I mean, by the time you're like 35, here's the thing. You better have your life shaped up at 35. I know too many people that are past that and they still can't figure it out. The Houston Rockets are never going to be able to figure it out. At this point, Daryl Morey's in Philadelphia. And I mean, D'Antoni's pretty much done. Chris Paul's in the finals in Phoenix. So is PJ Tucker. Clint Capella went to the Eastern Conference final. And that's it. That's all you got. So at this point, it's now a little too late for Houston. And it feels like they're going to be in this deep abysmal well that they can't get themselves out of, at least for years and years on end, until we start to see something change in this organization. But again, that's probably the only organization I know that is sitting on their couch. They're weeping and they're looking at the what could have been or what should have been. But that's the choice you make when you listen to the wrong person rather than really evaluate the situation and make the moves for the better. That's the way that the world works. Coming up.